loans.
Yep. What about business? I mean, you always tout yourself as pro-business, Bernard, but here we have transport firm Freightways chief executive Mark Trofke. Now, this is what he said, to quote, "The information we've got, and this is from GPS tracking vehicles in and out of around the CBD, that if you implement a 30k speed limit, you'll cause a considerable increase in transit time, and that leads to a pretty chunky loss in productivity." Tell you what, but to both of you, actually, this city will grind to a halt if we have 30 k's per hour.
Well, if you got
Bernard.
rid of the cars, plenty of room for the trucks to go at 30k.
Living in the real, it's never going to happen. So let's just...
Never going to happen? Well, if we're going to deal with climate change and actually have affordable housing, we need to tighten up this city, have affordable, clean, dry apartments in 3 to 4 story buildings that are cyclable or walkable to the CBD and public transport. And, good luck trying to own a car in 10, 20 years' time when there's a massive tax, or the car company being put out of business by the pension funds who won't touch them. And it's moving quicker than everyone thinks.
Jalisa,
and we should push it along.
But businesses been bogged down in slow transit time because of your slow increases.
Yeah, so NZTA has done the numbers on this, and the delays in travel, even when you drop the speed limit by as much as 20 kilometres an hour, are a matter of minutes, seconds more. So the effect is not as vast as you might think. And also in terms of productivity, I mean, what price is a life? A human life, the cost to the country of people injured in traffic, it's been going up. We've got to bring it down. I think this just makes sense.
I've got to say, looking at those figures, what are we seeing here? From 2014, 2017, this city, 69 people died and nearly 800 people seriously injured.
Yep,
that's unacceptable, isn't it?
It's unacceptable.
So
and half of those
that's got to come down
outside of cars. Exactly. Yeah, we can't stand for this. If that many people were being hit by falling bricks, we'd be up in arms about it. But it's cars driving around our city at speeds that are unsustainable with city life.
Yeah, if it was a plane crash, there'd be a public inquiry.
Correct.
Okay, so for those listening today, go, all right. Give us a tip. I want to try and use my city in a different way. What tip would you give them?
Buy an electric bike and have the time of your life.
Yeah, I've noticed you.
Or a scooter.
Yeah, I've noticed that you bring in your fancy scooper. Are you getting paid by electric bikes? Says my producer.
No, I paid quite a bit of money, but I'm getting my money's back, and I'm having a fun time because I live in Wellington. There's a few hills, so you actually do have to push a bit. But I get around fast. It's fun. I couldn't brag. I talk about it enough.
What's the uptake on people bike riding?
Bike riding in general?
Yeah.
It's up, let's see, across the city it's up about 10% each year. It's rising.
Each year?
Oh, yeah. And the numbers, you're seeing them on the connected cycleways. So every time you build a cycleway, join it to another one, you get double figure rises along
network
those
effect.
routes. Yeah, it's a network effect.
And you compound that, and you have decent cycleways and pedestrian ways, and get rid of the cars. It'll just explode. And particularly
your purity of vision,
and if you particularly get the volume of bikes coming in, the price will come down. Actually, the government should be using money to subsidise these bikes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Biking is great, but sometimes this evangelising really gets me because there are a lot of people who can't ride bikes.
Oh no, there's lots of different types of bikes.
He's been evangelising the whole time, hasn't he? Bernard Hickey,
social activist. That's
blah, what I am. Blah. Hey, what a great panel! Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you very much for joining us, Bernard Hickey and Sue Bradford. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I'm Wallace Chaffin. Back tomorrow 3:45. See ya.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, billowing black smoke clouds Auckland's skyline as the casino's partially built convention centre burns. More than 25 crews are doing battle. Some have come from as far away as Hamilton. We go live to the fire. An innocent driver is dead after a police pursuit in Christchurch turns fatal. 5 people in the fleeing car are injured, 1 critically. Why did the police chase them? And what's it really like to be a number on a hospital waiting list, stuck in treatment limbo? Well, it's enough to make a grown man cry. And the Rogue Chicken Roundup is underway in Titirangi. Don't forget you can watch us live on Facebook, Freeview Channel 50, and check us out on Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon, I'm Paul Brennan. A fire that's engulfed the under-construction Sky City Convention Centre in Auckland is still raging. St John's say one person has been admitted to hospital in a serious condition. Sky City is evacuating its entire precinct, including the Sky Tower, casino, hotels and restaurants, because of the smoke. Health authorities in the city have also issued advice to people living and working near the fire to avoid breathing in the smoke. Fire and Emergency say the blaze started on the 7th floor before spreading to the 6th. Hundreds of construction workers were forced to evacuate, including Harry Johnson, who was having his lunch at the time.
Yeah, bloody hell, we were all scared. So, after that, what we did, we just evacuated the area, looked outside, and there was just a monster cloud of smoke right above us, and it was just scary, extremely scary.
Fire and Emergency says it's a challenging fire that will take some time to bring under control. More than 30 engines are at the scene. Roads are closed around the fire. The Transport Agency has also closed motorway on-ramps and off-ramps, causing headaches for commuters. Police say there is heavy traffic congestion and people are being told to stay away from the area. The police in Christchurch say officers are already getting more training on how to pursue fleeing drivers. A man has died after his vehicle was hit by a speeding car police were chasing in the city this morning. 5 other people were injured. Today's death brings the total who have died in police pursuits in Christchurch this year to 5. In March, the police and the Independent Police Conduct Authority completed a joint review into pursuit policies. Superintendent Lane Todd says the recommendations of the report are being adopted by police.
Additional training has been put in place, but also there's a higher reliance on what we call as the 10R risk assessment that the officers have to go through. So that's our threat exposure, necessity to respond, and then the response itself. So there's a lot more training and oversight of that particular process.
One person remains in a critical condition following today's chase. 3 are serious and another is moderate. A police officer who says he was bullied on the job is worried an independent review won't do anything to change the underlying culture. More than 100 current or former sworn and non-sworn police employees have told RNZ bullying is rife in the service. The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, has announced a review of the systems in place to deal with bullying complaints. The former police constable John Woodward says the inquiry needs to look at more than just the complaints process.
It's culture that's the problem, not process. There is, and always has been, a way of reporting a problem. Quite easy to do that, but it's the culture and the systematic sort of targeting that goes on after that, which I don't think any independent review will find or really be able to do a lot about, because I think it's a longer-term fix.
The terms of reference for the review will be announced later this week. Incumbent Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is projected to win Canada's election. Canada's national broadcaster, the CBC, is predicting a Liberal minority government. This means that while Liberals are likely to win more seats than any other party, but will not have a majority in Parliament. Auckland Transport has decided to lower speed limits in most of the central city to 30 kilometres an hour, with a few exceptions. Its board today voted to lower speed limits on most inner-city roads to 30 kilometres an hour, with 14 town centres also getting 13-kilometre limits. Speed limits on some rural roads will also be lowered. Auckland Transport CEO Shane Ellison was asked about the many thousands of submissions opposed to the lower limits, many of them worried about loss of productivity.
The social and economic cost of road trauma per annum in Auckland is about $1.1 billion. And, that includes the direct impact of those who are injured or killed on our roads, their whānau, the health system, and, the obvious resulting congestion.
Auckland Transport Chief Executive Shane Ellison there. A major upgrade of Wellington's airport has been revealed today, costing over $1 billion. A new international terminus is hoped to be finished in 7 years' time, with the current building becoming just used for domestic travel. The Chief Executive says the plan has been a long time in the making, with the airport aware it needs to be able to accommodate a future with double the number of passengers. Steve Sanderson says finding land to develop has been the real challenge.
Wellington Airport operates on the smallest piece of land of 110 hectares. Compare that to Auckland, which is close to 1,600 hectares of land. So, we put a lot of thought into that. So the only way that we can do that is go south and to the east into the golf course. And those discussions with the golf course are well advanced now, and we're confident we'll have a commercial deal within this side of Christmas.
Wellington Airport's Steve Sanderson. And it is nearly 4 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The England cricketers have arrived in New Zealand and say it's time to move on from the World Cup victory over the Black Caps. In 10 days' time, the two sides will meet for the first time since July, which saw England lift the trophy by the narrowest of margins at Lord's. The New England coach, Chris Silverwood, says it's inevitable that famous game will generate conversations while they're in New Zealand.
Obviously, it was a fantastic game of cricket to be involved in it. From a spectator's point of view, if you don't like cricket after that game, you never will. And I thought the spirit that the game was played in as well was absolutely fantastic. But we have got to move on. We're here to concentrate on the series that's in front of us. It's always a hard-fought series when we come out to New Zealand, played by two very good teams.
England coach Chris Silverwood. The Black Caps and England play 5 T20s before 2 test matches. Wallabies players have returned to Australia, accepting that they just weren't good enough after their humbling Rugby World Cup quarter-final exit. On his arrival at Sydney Airport this morning, skipper Michael Hooper refused to blame coach Michael Cheika's erratic selections or the high-risk game plan during Saturday's 40-16 loss to England. Meanwhile, Welshman Nigel Owens will referee the All Blacks England semi-final match this weekend. South African referee Jaco Piper has apologised but paid a price after a photograph emerged of him posing with Welsh fans mimicking a red card incident during the World Cup quarter-final between Wales and France. World Rugby says Piper was not considered when selecting the match officials for this weekend's semi-finals. And that's the news.
A targeted attack on a police officer.
This is not okay. This is a blatant act of or attempted intimidation against these police staff.
Local reaction in Wairoa.
Whoever's done this, it's just a cowardly act, and picking up a shotgun and going out and doing that, there's nothing tough about that.
The police minister backs armed officers on the town streets.
Gangs were out of control, the meth became a real plague. So, we need to go very hard against these guys, and I make no apologies for doing that.
Local stories when it matters. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, award-winning engineer and academic Dr. Volker Nock on his work to combat kauri dieback. And after 10, Professor Jane Harding on getting the country's top research award for breakthroughs in baby healthcare. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast now from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland to Taranaki, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Showers heavy with possible squally thunderstorms and hail tomorrow morning. Gale westerlies easing tomorrow afternoon. Snow to 700 metres about the central high country at first. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine. Heavy showers and possible thunderstorms with gale southerlies tomorrow morning, clearing in the afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, that includes Wairarapa, also Marlborough and Canterbury. Showers possibly heavy and thundery, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Snow to 300 metres in Canterbury and Marlborough tonight, and gale southerlies tomorrow morning. Nelson, scattered showers from this evening, some heavy, clearing tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, rain heavy with possible thunderstorms, becoming fine tonight, and then rain returning tomorrow night. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers possibly heavy, falling as snow to 400 metres, clearing for a time tomorrow afternoon. And just a few showers at the Chatham Islands. It's just after 5:07.
Thanks, Paul. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. As we go to air tonight, the partially built Sky City Convention Centre in Auckland CBD is well ablaze. Fire crews from across the city are battling the massive fire that broke out about 4 hours ago. Some firefighters have been called in from Hamilton. Huge flames could be seen from several buildings away, with plumes of black smoke blanketing the block and beyond. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from the surrounding area, and traffic in some parts of the CBD has come to a standstill. Health authorities are also advising people living and working near the fire to avoid breathing in the smoke. It's yet another setback for the convention centre, which is already 2 years behind its completion date. And there's concern that today's fire may have sent that schedule up in smoke. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Munro filed this report.
Oh, it's getting worse. They're trying their level best to get rid of this. Can see the flames clearly coming out. Wow, this is getting even worse.
Auckland's skyline eclipsed as huge black clouds erupted from the construction site of Sky City's International Convention Centre. Smoke began pouring out of the centre's roof just after 1 p.m, with bright flames erupting into the sky. More than 20 fire trucks rushed from all over the city, and some as far as Hamilton, to battle the blaze.
It's a very challenging fire. We've been here for a number of hours now. We are not on top of the fire. We have a sixth alarm. That's Auckland at its capacity at the moment. If we were to have another fire of this significance, then no, we don't have enough resources.
Fire and Emergencies Dave Woon says there were no injuries, but one person was unaccounted for.
We're trying to account for one person, but we don't think that's a problem.
The fire shut down parts of Wellesley, Hobson and Nelson streets. The chaotic scenes coincided with the lunchtime rush, with hundreds of people gathering to watch the drama unfold.
We were told to stay away from the windows.
I think this is probably a little bit more interesting at this stage.
If it's waterproofing, it won't be good for you.
Harsh Khanna is the manager at the nearby Quest Motel and watched the fire take hold.
There was a couple of us sitting on the deck going like, oh wow, this is getting absolutely absurd. It took a good 20-25 minutes before the firefighters could actually get up there on the roof to get the smoke out, but it was quite scary.
Smoke has been billowing out of the convention centre for well over half an hour now, and the 800 or so staff that usually work here have been told to push back because of fears that smoke may in fact be toxic. They still don't know what's burning at this stage. It's yet more bad news for Sky City's $700 million international convention centre and hotel project, which has been plagued by problems, including cost overruns and construction delays. The complex is being built by Fletcher Construction, and Sky City had been scheduled to open late next year. But today's fire is yet another setback.
It's just been one of those jinx projects which has got delays after delays. I mean, the last thing we heard, it was opening in January 2021. I don't know what's this going to do with it. I really hope it goes faster, because it's obviously good business for everyone the day it opens up, and but I'm just not sure what's going on with Fletcher's here.
Sky City says it doesn't know the source of the fire at this stage and was assessing the situation and damage.
And Nita Blake-Person is on the corner of Wellesley and Hobson Streets and joins us now live. Nita, what does it look like down there now?
Well, it's a big smoky mess still here, Lisa. That fire looks like it's far from out. Even about 20 minutes ago, the smoke looked like it was returning to a white colour, but it's since gone back to that black, and there's a lot of people gathered around here wearing gas masks because the smell is just pretty pungent. There's a cherry picker right in the midst of it. It must be hanging about 10 stories up, just pouring water onto the site, but it's barely visible actually through all the smoke at this stage. It's the only appliance that does seem to be hovering and fighting that blaze at the moment. But as I say, a lot of people watching from beyond the cordon. They're wearing masks and taking photos because it still looks pretty dramatic at this end.
So how bad is traffic? Obviously it's in the middle of the CBD and it's home time for a lot of people. This is rush hour.
That's right. Well, it's backing up. The cordon's set in place at the moment directly around the fire scene. Wellesley between Hobson and Sale Street, Nelson between Vic and Cook, and Hobson between Wellesley and Vic. So that's a pretty big portion of the CBD. It's gridlock in parts, but I think a lot of people are steering well clear of this area as they've been advised. Police and emergency services are basically saying if you don't have to come anywhere near this area, please don't, as they try and put out this fire. But buses are having to be rerouted and things like that, so people will need to check where their alternative stops are. There's a lot of traffic, and it will be some time getting home tonight for a lot of people.
Thanks, Nita. That's Nita Blake-Person, who's at the scene of that Sky City Convention Centre fire, and we will bring you developments throughout the program this evening. Let's head to the South Island now, and an innocent driver has died and 5 others have been injured after another police pursuit ended in tragedy in Christchurch. The motorist died after his car was hit by a fleeing Toyota at just after 4 this morning. It brings the number of people who have died from police chases in the city to 5 this year alone. Despite that, the police minister says there will be no review of pursuit policy. Christchurch reporter Nicholas Poynton and cameraman Simon Rogers have the story.
The crash at the intersection of Idris and Glandovie roads happened just after 4 o'clock this morning. Police were chasing a car seen driving erratically and pursued it for 4 minutes before it ploughed into the innocent driver's vehicle. The impact shunted the car into a stone wall, critically injuring the driver, who later died in hospital. The collision happened in front of Nigel Watts's Fendleton home.
The police don't seem to, in my opinion, know when to back off to these guys. They just push them, and this is what happens. They take somebody else out on the way through. I'm less than impressed, actually, because if they've chased that guy from Papanui Road, it's a fair way, straight up through this residential area. It's pretty ridiculous, I think. They should have just backed off, and this mightn't have happened.
Sentiments echoed by his wife, Sandra Francis.
I think they need to back off, these young boys, and just slow down and catch them down the track. Not right here in the middle of the city in the residential area. You know, look what's happened.
However, their neighbour, Sarah Webster, says police have no choice but to give chase.
Obviously they're up to no good, so the police are only doing their job, aren't they? Just a shame that the poor innocent people were in the road.
Of the 5 in the car being chased, 1 is in a critical condition, with the other 4 having moderate or serious injuries. The actions of the officers involved in this morning's chase are now being investigated by the Independent Police Conduct Authority. Their boss, Canterbury Metro Area Commander Lane Todd, says the chase was still underway when the crash happened. He would not be drawn on whether the officers were ordered to abandon it, but he insisted the findings of a review into police chases in March were now being implemented by his officers.
Additional training has been put in place, but also there's a higher reliance on what we call as the TNR risk assessment that the officers have to go through. So that's our threat exposure, necessity to respond, and then the response itself. So there's a lot more training and oversight of that particular process.
Lane Todd says police have visited the family of the man who died.
This incident is an absolute tragedy, and our thoughts are with the family of the man who has died and with those who are injured. Every day our staff come to work to protect the community and keep them safe. That this event has occurred is devastating.
Today's crash brings the number of people who have died from police chases in Christchurch to 5 this year alone. In January, 3 teenage boys died on Blenheim Road when their car crashed and burned after hitting road spikes laid by the police. In August, a pedestrian was hit and killed by a man in a stolen van fleeing the police. Despite the rising body count, Police Minister Stuart Nash says there is no need for a review into police policies.
We had a review that came out, I think, in about March the 13th or 14th this year, but it was a comprehensive review with a number of recommendations, and I think police agreed with all the recommendations and are in the process of implementing those.
In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Nicholas Poynton.
The 5 people in the fleeing car are still being treated in hospital and nobody has yet been charged. If you were listening to that, you can go back online. We'll post Nicholas and Simon's piece on our Facebook page. You can see video of the crash scene and the vehicles we're talking about. It is 17 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that story. What can we do about these police pursuits? Innocent people are being killed as part of it. Is there a solution? Let us know your thoughts. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Also, would love to hear from you if you're in Auckland CBD at the moment or making your way home. What is it like out there with that fire burning at the convention centre? So what is it really like to be an unspecified number on a hospital waiting list with no idea when you might get the operation you need, stuck in treatment limbo? Tonight we bring you Jeff's story. Not sick enough to be a top priority, but certainly unwell enough to make life pretty bloody miserable. Yesterday we reported on the Southern DHB being forced to apologise to 4 urology patients whose treatment and care fell short of required standards. In one case, it's likely to have shortened a patient's life expectancy. In fact, a damning Health and Disability Commissioner report found lengthy delays in assessment and treatment had resulted in substantial clinical risk. Here's the Southern DHB boss, Chris Fleming, responding to that report on the programme yesterday.
Look, I think what we need to focus on is the improvements that we've made, and I'm quite proud of the way the team have pulled together to improve the services overall.
Right now, how many patients are waiting outside the recommended times, whether that be for a first specialist appointment, a biopsy or treatment? So, how many are outside the recommended times?
For those patients who have been seen and who have been identified as needing surgery, there are around about 100 patients waiting longer than the 4 months.
That was Chris Fleming, their CEO. So 100 people waiting longer than the Ministry of Health guidelines for their operation. Number 61 on that list is 81-year-old Dunedin man Jeff. Jeff needs a small surgical procedure so he can pee properly. A 2 to 8 week wait is what he was told to expect. That was months ago.
I'm still waiting here. I did ring last week to see how I was going on the waiting list, and they said there's 60 people ahead of me, and I haven't moved because they can't get theatre time to get the list down.
And tell me, how bad is it while you wait? What are your symptoms?
Well, it's not a continual thing. It just comes in bursts. The worst was when I was having to go to the loo between 20 minutes and half an hour and passing nothing but just having a wee dribble. And that went on, for about 5 days and 5 nights till I collapsed through lack of sleep or something. But my wife found me lying on the floor. She called the ambulance. They took me and they said, we'll sort it out for you, don't worry. Yeah, but they sent me home and it's never improved. But the time has changed right out now. Sometimes I might go as much as an hour without going to the toilet.
And so
which is livable.
What's it meant for your quality of life?
Oh, you spend half your time looking for a toilet. Quality of life is not so hot because if you don't get rid of all your urine, you get an infection down there. And if you get an infection, you then get to the stage where you get weak clots and you're peeing out clots, and it really makes your eyes water.
Jeff, do you mean blood clots, that you are sometimes passing blood clots when you get infections, waiting for an operation?
Yes. Yeah, that's the sort of thing. So they then put you on something to get rid of that, which does, but it recurs all the time.
I want people to understand what that is like for you. So can you explain to me what is it like? I mean, how painful is that?
It's about as painful. It's pretty bad, really, because you burst into pee and there's a blockage there, then it flies out. When I say flies out, it falls out fast. And you get a bit of relief. But within a few seconds, there's another one, and you'll get a stream of them. Then I suppose you run out of clots there, and it stops again for a while, then builds up again. And that is not good until you get the antibiotics to stop it. It's pretty painful.
That sounds utterly horrendous, Jeff.
Yeah, well, it's not the sort of thing you want to happen continuously, and it's been happening too often.
When was the last time you felt well, that you felt like you could, simply go to the toilet and have a pee and everything was fine?
I can't remember that. Goodness me, no. You always start off by trying to get there before you really need to go because it happens in a hurry sometimes, but enough to be an embarrassment rather than relief.
So you've collapsed, at least once, but I understand you've collapsed more than that, haven't you?
Yes, several times.
Tell me about
twice
that.
I had to took in. Well, I can't tell you much because I was out to it, and they took me in twice in the ambulance. A&E sort of restored things. I've got no idea what they really did because I was out of it, and then they'd send me home again, and away we'd go again.
When you called them last week, were they able to give you an idea of how much longer you will have to wait?
No, none whatsoever. But I felt so sorry for the lady trying to organise the thing when she was getting blocked from the lack of theatre space so that people couldn't move.
So what do you reckon when they say that you're a non-urgent case?
Yes, yeah. I just don't... I don't know what to say to that. What can I do? All I can do is moan and complain about it, and nobody wants to listen. So I've driven my wife mad. I just don't know what else you can do. I can go to my doctor and he sympathises, but that isn't getting any better.
So here's your opportunity to speak to the boss of the Southern DHB. What would you want to say to him? Because he told us yesterday that he's proud of the improvements that they've made to the service there. Here's your chance. What would you like to say to him?
He obviously has rose-tinted glasses. That thing hasn't improved, has it? Otherwise you wouldn't have a waiting list. And to be knocked back at every time you go there, it's a bit much. You work and you do your best all your working life, and you think you're going to be looked after by society, but you're not, are you? You're just left out there. And I presume at my age they'll be saying, well, put him up again, he's a fair chance he'll kick the bucket, so we'll be right. And obviously you don't want to be treated like that. But I don't know, it's a feeling of uselessness because you can't do anything. We can't go for a holiday because there's not enough toilets around. And we can't travel too far. Once again, you know, my bladder stops us doing that sort of thing. And the pills that they put you on we've had 20 years now since we've had a sexual relationship with the bloody pills. So this is not good.
And the thing is, it seems like such a simple procedure that you need that could change your quality of life considerably.
Yes. Yes, I'd like that to happen. But I really can't believe that. I can't believe I'm talking like this. No. It is a simple operation, I believe, but it is still an operation, and we are still waiting.
And that's Jeff, a Dunedin man who's on the waiting list for prostate surgery. The police have announced there will be an independent review into how bullying complaints are dealt with in the organisation. It comes after an RNZ investigation into which more than 100 current or former police officers and non-sworn staff spoke out about how bullying is rife within the service. And some of those who say they have been bullied are now concerned at whether the review will go far enough. Ben Strang reports.
Current and former police employees have told RNZ their bullying complaints were often referred directly to the person they complained about, and the bullying then intensified. Many say they didn't complain because of their concerns about the handling of other complaints and turned to drugs or alcohol instead. Several staff told RNZ they attempted or considered suicide as a result. But just last month, the Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, dismissed claims that the police had a bullying culture.
We do not tolerate bullying in our organisation. The culture inside the New Zealand Police has changed significantly over the last 10 years, and it's a very, very positive environment. But as the Commissioner, I'm determined to ensure that our workplace is a safe workplace for everyone. So we've set up good systems to ensure that if people feel they're being bullied, they've got somewhere to go and report it.
Fast forward to today, and Mike Bush has now announced an independent review of the police's systems and processes to deal with bullying complaints. The head of Human Resources at the police, Kay Ryan, has already acknowledged that senior managers using the Speak Up complaints system are confused as to what they should be doing. And she said that was leading to some of the issues RNZ was reporting. But those who say they're victims of bullying believe it's more than that. John Woodward, who was a sole charge constable at Ross on the West Coast, says the review is a good start.
That's a huge first step for sure. I think it's what we've been after for a while, and what I'm reading is it's someone independent they've put in, which is good because unfortunately some of the reviews in the past have been internally reviewed and of course come out finding nothing.
But Mr Woodward says the inquiry needs to look at more than just the complaints process and should shine a light on the underlying issue, the culture.
That's the one thing that's going to be missing, and probably I think for 99% of the people that have come forward or experienced it, myself included, it's culture that's the problem, not a process. There is, and always has been, a way of reporting a problem, quite easy to do that, but it's the culture and the systematic sort of targeting that goes on after that, which I don't think any independent review will find or really be able to do a lot about, because I think it's a longer term fix.
That sentiment was echoed by the president of the Police Association, Chris Cahill, who says it wouldn't make sense to review the complaints procedure without looking at the actual bullying.
You can't sort of look at just a process, and if there's a significant
issue in culture. You've got to address that as well. And look, in fairness, I'll tell you that our survey of our members shows that they're saying it is a significant problem that seems to be getting worse. So we've had a jump in our membership that say it's a serious or very serious problem from 20 to 25% of members in our latest survey.
Independent consultant Debbie Francis will lead the review, fresh from her inquiry into bullying and harassment at Parliament. The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, says she is someone of great integrity and that it's great to take an independent look at the police's systems. But he doubled down today, saying he disagrees with comments that the police have a bullying culture.
I don't agree with that. I think police culture in the last 10 years has changed considerably, and you had the Dame Margaret Bays report about 11 years ago, and a year ago you had a review of that, and that report, the 10-year-on report, said that the police culture has changed substantially, and the Police Commissioner has worked very hard on changing the culture, and he is very clear, as am I, that there is no place for bullying in the New Zealand Police Service.
The terms of reference for the review will be announced later this week, and the full review will be made public once it's completed. For Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
And the Police Commissioner declined an interview today, saying there won't be a comment until after the inquiry. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, speed limits will be lowered on hundreds of Auckland roads next year, and legislation to clamp down on returning foreign fighters will be delayed. We'd love your feedback about anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. Text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Lisa. Sky City in Auckland has evacuated its entire precinct, including the Sky Tower and casino, because of smoke from a fire that has engulfed the under-construction convention centre. St John Ambulance says one person has been admitted to hospital in a serious condition. Our reporters at the scene say it's a big black smoky mess, with people being told to move back in case it's toxic. Hundreds of people have been evacuated from the surrounding area and streets are cordoned off with buses rerouted. Health authorities in the city have also issued advice to people living and working near the fire to avoid breathing in the smoke. The police in Christchurch say officers are already getting more training on how to pursue fleeing drivers. After a man died when his vehicle was hit by a speeding car, police were chasing in the city this morning. 5 other people were injured. Today's death brings the total killed in pursuits in Christchurch this year. Early results from Canada's parliamentary elections indicate that Justin Trudeau will be returned to office as Prime Minister, but without an outright majority. With counting still underway from the Atlantic to the Pacific coasts, Mr Trudeau's Liberals are ahead of their main challengers, the Conservatives, led by Andrew Scheer. A police officer who says he was bullied on the job is worried an independent review will not do anything to change the underlying culture. The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, has announced a review of the systems in place to deal with bullying complaints. Former Police Constable John Woodward says the inquiry needs to look at more than just the complaints process. More than 100 police employees have told RNZ bullying is rife in the service. In Dunedin, police say a person is critically injured after being hit by a truck in central Dunedin this afternoon. It happened on Friat Street just after 4. Drivers are being told to avoid the area. And in sport, Welshman Nigel Owens will referee the All Blacks England semi-final match this weekend. Those are the headlines.
Thanks, Paul. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. You've come along at just the right time for business news with Nona Peltier. Nona, Fonterra has raised its farm gate milk forecast. So is that going to make much of a difference to farmers? What are the numbers?
It will. Yeah, the numbers are, it's $1. Point there is $7.05. That's a good increase, and that's a fairly good price for farmers. For the economy generally, when the farmers get that much, the economy is boosted by $500 million. That's a big injection.
From spending down the line.
Yeah, well, the 30-cent increase really translates to $500 million. Well, 450 million, but, round numbers, so to speak. And in any case, sure, it's going to flow down to their bottom line. So it's always a double-edged sword with Fonterra. Sure, the farm gate milk price is going to go up. That means their ingredient costs go up as well. And that means that profitability is impacted. However, the company's pretty confident that they can still deliver on their expectations. operations because they're building efficiencies through the business. And the market certainly agreed because their share price rose 1.25% today.
Interesting. Hey, you've also sparked my interest with this. Sky TV and Spark, so they're at it again bidding for sports rights.
Yeah.
What is there left to battle over, Nona?
Okay, let's see. Today we've got in the latest salvo is the sport rights for the Silver Ferns.
Oh.
Yeah, so they've got the rights till 2024.
They being Sky.
Sky TV, yes, and right, that's right. But then Spark didn't waste any time firing back, saying that they've got a new deal for international cricket, which we'll see it provide some highlights from the big international games, which Sky TV has the rights to. So they'll be able to offer some highlights from that. So there you go.
Competition coming thick and fast.
I'll say.
Hey, and what else has been happening on the markets today?
Well, I guess the share prices, people were watching very closely what was happening with Sky City share price. It dropped 2.75% at the close, but it had been down about 4% earlier on when the scale of the fire was really at its peak. Fletcher Building down 1.5%, and I can tell you that's not the last we're going to hear about this story, that's for sure. Overall, the NZX Top 50 Index, it rose 0.25%. That's 28 points up to 11,090. And the Kiwi has also been perked up, no doubt, probably because of that boost to the economy from the Farmgate milk payout. And that was 64.3 US cents.
64. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It has been a while.
Yeah.
It hasn't been up that high. 93.5 Australian, also quite good. But then steady against the British pound at 49.5 British pence. I guess everyone's just still waiting for that to sort itself out.
Yeah. Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business news. Speed limits will be lowered on hundreds of Auckland roads next year, with drivers limited to 30 kilometres per hour in most of the CBD after more than 11,700 public submissions. Auckland Transport's Board of Directors has decided to lower speed limits on nearly 10% of the region's roads. Jessie Chang reports.
Driving in the city centre will now be capped at 30 kilometres per hour, except Nelson, Hobson and Fanshawe streets, which will drop to 40 kilometres per hour. 14 town centres are also getting 30-kilometre speed limits, including places like Orewa. And while speeds on rural roads will also be cut down, decisions on 20 of those roads will now be deferred. Auckland Transport's Chief Transport Operations Officer, Andrew Allen, says he personally thought the proposal could be stronger.
From a management perspective, we feel that we have made an appropriate or taken an appropriate response to the issue in front of us that we're facing. Too aggressive? Don't think so. Not aggressive enough? My personal opinion would be probably not aggressive enough.
64 people died on Auckland roads in 2017, with nearly 750 other people seriously injured. That is a 78% increase in road deaths in 3 years. Auckland Transport says the estimated economic and social costs of death and serious injuries in Auckland is $1.2 billion every year. Of the 11,700 submissions, there were slightly more in favour of keeping the status quo, but Executive General Manager stakeholder Wally Thomas says those supporting the change represented large groups of people.
Those raw numbers, what they don't show is the very supportive submitters who represent large constituencies. So examples being 13 local boards who represent 870,000 people were generally supportive. Regional Public Health Service, representing all Aucklanders, was supportive of slower speeds.
There were 3 options for the board to consider. Option 1 was to defer the decision. Option 2 was to implement the entire proposal, and Option 3 was to make some exceptions. Freight and post businesses were strongly opposed to the 30-kilometre-per-hour speed limit on Hobson, Nelson and Fanshawe streets, saying it would slow travel times and hurt productivity. But Group Manager for the Network Management, Randhir Kama, says those street speeds need to be lowered.
Because Nelson, Fanshawe and Hobson are 3 of our highest risk corridors in the city centre, leaving the speed limits at 50 kilometres per hour, we essentially lost up to 20% of any benefit on the network for the city centre.
In the end, the Auckland Transport Board voted unanimously for Option 3, allowing a 40-kilometre-per-hour limit for those major city roads. Its chair, Les Levy, hopes more people will now be kept safe.
What we're indicating today is that everybody, no matter what you use in terms of your mobility, deserves protection and to be kept as safe as possible.
The new rules will come into effect in June next year. I tamaki makoto mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko te se Chang tēnei.
Let us know what you think about that. So 30 kilometres an hour in a number of areas around the CBD. Get in touch, 2101, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Legislation to clamp down on returning foreign fighters will be delayed after the Justice Minister failed to get the National Party on board. The Counterterrorism Bill was scheduled to have its first reading tonight, but has now been shunted well down the list. Andrew Little is proposing a control orders regime to boost government powers to deal with people trying to get back to New Zealand after fighting for extremist groups or having helped their cause. But despite a meeting last night, Nationals leader and the minister could not reach an agreement. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The bill would allow police to impose a range of restrictions on people arriving home from countries like Syria for up to 6 years. Mr Little says the matter had taken on some urgency with the changing situation in Syria, where the Kurds said keeping ISIS detainees in custody was no longer a priority while they were under attack from Turkey. One of those still in detention is the so-called bumbling jihadi New Zealander Mark Taylor. Mr Little says National confirmed its support for the law changes via email last week, but now won't follow through with that commitment.
After that, they then tried to seek conditions. I've met with them to talk about that, and so far they've indicated that they may, they haven't indicated whether or not they will support for it. So, frankly, I do feel a little dicked around by them.
National leader Simon Bridges has one word for the minister's negotiating style.
Belligerent.
National is seeking changes around lowering the age, extending the duration and giving authorities the ability to lock people up for 72 hours on arrival in New Zealand. Mr Bridges won't yet commit to supporting the first reading, but says National will continue negotiating in good faith.
We want to continue discussions with Minister Little. I'm not going to get into the name and the blame game, even if he is.
The bill was scheduled to have its first reading tonight, but is now at number 19 on the order paper, which means it won't come up. Mr Little says the ball is in National's court.
Yeah, if the real question is, what has the National Party done? They've said they don't support it, they won't support it. That was as of late this morning. And I'm continuing discussions with them of sorts and with the Green Party.
The Greens Justice spokesperson Golriz Garaman outlined the changes they want in return for their support.
So we want the definition of terror in terms of terror convictions or deportation to be a New Zealand-based definition or come from jurisdictions that are comparable to ours. And we would like procedural safeguards to be placed in there, so we're not just relying on secret classified information with no ability for people to properly challenge the orders being applied to them.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says they had taken the opposition at their word.
At least we would have liked to. They did give the Minister written confirmation that they would support the returning foreign fighters legislation. They have then reneged on their word.
There would have been plenty of time for National to negotiate changes through the Select Committee process, she says, which that party has chosen not to do. National denies any brinksmanship, saying they were not going to support a law that played Russian roulette with the safety of New Zealanders. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
It's about 17 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. As always, we are keen to hear your feedback. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I was just looking at some of the information on those speed limit reductions. So at 50 kilometres an hour, if you're directly hit as a pedestrian, there's an 80% chance that you will die. 30 kilometres, that drops to just a 10% chance that you will be killed. So is it worth it, lowering the speed limits for you? Let us know your thoughts. The polls have now closed in Canada's federal elections, and it's looking like one of the closest results ever. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party appear to have held on to power over Andrew Scheer's Conservative Party by the slightest of margins. The BBC's chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has the latest.
Yes, all the indications are that Justin Trudeau's Liberals will be returning to power, not with a majority that they won in 2015, but certainly with a minority government. And it looks like more seats than the polls had indicated. The clock has just struck midnight here in Toronto. The polls closed right across this country when they finished in British Columbia on the West Coast 2 hours ago. And region by region, there is a clear trend. Only about 50 more ridings to be declared in a House of Commons with 338 seats. And so far, the 129 seats for the Liberals, and behind them, 110 for the Conservatives. But as is the nature of this first past the post system, it is the Conservatives who are ahead in the popular vote.
And that's Lise Doucette. The England coach, Eddie Jones, believes his side has the weapons to upset the All Blacks in this weekend's Rugby World Cup semi-final in Tokyo. That's so long as the English players don't fall into the trap of stargazing against the world champs. England and their fans are confident they can go against the tide of history. But the defending champs, New Zealand, are also set to up the ante in Yokohama on Saturday as they seek a World Cup treble. Rugby reporter Joe Porter is fresh from the latest All Blacks media conference. Joe, so we now know who our ref is for the weekend, Nigel Owens. The All Blacks will be pretty pleased with that, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. He's the referee they would have wanted all along. Of course, he was in charge of their game against Ireland, where they really put the Irish to the sword. He's the best referee in world rugby right now by quite some distance, and it means they don't get, I won't name the man, but a slightly less competent Frenchman who is a little bit whistle-happy and has been known to make some rather large calls in terms of cards so far this World Cup. So no, the All Blacks will be very pleased to have Welshman Nigel Owens in charge of the match. He did a good job in the game against Ireland, and they'll be looking for a similar performance from him.
Hey, so Kieran Reid, our captain, was AWOL this morning from training. Is there any reason for us to be worried about that?
Yeah, well, that's right. It was the talk of the media session before the All Blacks walked in today. Why wasn't Kieran Reid at training this morning? Where was he? Steve Hansen tried to put everyone's fears to rest and said, no, he'll be available this weekend. He was just doing some extra work inside the gym on the bike. I guess it's a bit of a rest for what is a slightly older carcass amongst the All Blacks team. So giving Captain Kieran Reid a bit of a break from some of the physicality they've been training with. Sam Whitelock, the lock, was up during the press conference. He said Captain Kieran Reid simply doesn't like getting wet. It's been very rainy today here in Tokyo, and he jokes that Captain Kieran Reid just didn't want to get his hair wet in the Tokyo conditions. So no, he should be right for the weekend. No reason to be concerned at this point.
Any other injury concerns though in the squad?
Yeah, well, Matt Todd has now been confirmed that he won't be available for this week. It was suggested on Sunday that he'd re-damaged his shoulder that he dislocated earlier this year and was unlikely to be available. He's now been ruled out for this test. The All Blacks won't be seeking a replacement for him in the squad, though. If they do reach the final, they are confident that Matt Todd will be ready to go for that match. So it'll mean a little bit of a reshuffle on the bench in terms of who covers that loose forward position.
Hey, so one of the other great championships, one of the other games it seems going on is between the two coaches, Eddie Jones and Steve Hansen. So what's going on there? Are they upping the ante again?
Yes, well, they're very good friends, of course, and we know that Eddie Jones likes a bit of banter. Eddie Jones apparently has been contacting Steve fairly regularly already during this week to make sure he knows just how confident England are and how they're feeling about playing the All Blacks and just how confident they are of upsetting the world champion. Steve Hansen, apparently, he tells us today, hasn't been buying into it so far. Radio silence from Steve Hansen back to Eddie Jones so far this week. He said, though, that may change as the week goes on. Steve Hansen likes to play it by ear, and if he feels a psychological dig might help his side come out on top on the weekend, he'll send a few barbs Eddie Jones' way. But yes, radio silence from Steve Hansen so far, ignoring those ticks and prods from Eddie Jones, but we'll see what pans out later in the week. Certainly the mind games do get played between coaches. They have each other's numbers. Steve Hansen readily admits that he'll go there, he'll fire off a barb, he'll have a dig if he thinks it'll help his side. By the same token, if he thinks it's best to remain silent and not say anything, he'll play the strong, silent type as well. So interesting to see how that will pan out later in the week. So far, though, radio silence from Steve Hansen.
Thanks, Joe. Good to talk to you. That is Joe Porter, or Joe Sporter as we know him, joining us live there from Tokyo. The Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri has announced reforms approved by his cabinet in response to a wave of mass demonstrations. Initially, the protests were against a new tax on WhatsApp calls, but widened to voice anger about government corruption, economic mismanagement and poor public services. The BBC's Martin Patience reports.
In the capital Beirut and across Lebanon, the people are staging an extraordinary revolt against their politicians. For now, at least, a sense of national unity has replaced the country's bitter sectarian divisions.
For the first time in this country, there is a real unity, and not a fake one like we've seen before. The economic situation and the corruption in government has become so bad that everyone can agree on one thing. These people are criminals and they need to leave.
Do you want the government to step down?
Of course we want the government to step down, and we also want to be like a logic way to step down, not like just like in a chaotic way, because the government, or actually the country, Lebanon, doesn't need to be in a chaotic way.
The country's Prime Minister is besieged from every quarter.
You are calling for your dignity, your patriotic and individual dignity, basic services, job opportunities, and above all respect for your demands. And make no mistake, you are heard.
The Prime Minister's promise to slash politicians' pay is unlikely to satisfy protesters who want their leaders in jail.
For the past few days, Lebanon has been a country transformed, but the carnival-like atmosphere here masks the dangers. The country's leaders are paralysed by these protests, but that doesn't mean they're going to hand over power without a fight.
This feels like a country reborn, but old divisions die hard here.
Martin Patience on the streets in Beirut. A senior sergeant has told a coronial inquest South Auckland police officers are reluctant to take injured prisoners to Middlemore Hospital as they are often turned away. 21-year-old Century Taitoko died in a suicide watch cell at Counties Manukau Police Station in February 2014 after hitting his head dozens of times. Mr Taitoko, who was high on drugs and acting aggressively, wasn't taken to Middlemore Hospital that night following advice given to the police by a doctor who can't be named. But the senior sergeant says Mr Taitoko should have been taken to the emergency department. Katie Scotcher reports.
It was a busy night at the county's Manukau police station on February the 22nd, 2014. There was a steady stream of incoming prisoners, and Century Taitoko was one of them. The 21-year-old had just spent several sleepless days consuming methamphetamine, alcohol and LSD and had been arrested for breaching the peace. He was placed in a suicide watch cell at the station, which had no furniture, with the CCTV cameras rolling. Throughout the night, he hit his head repeatedly against the walls and floor of the cell. Senior Sergeant Ian Brenchley, who was stationed at the county's Manukau police station that night, told the inquest Mr Taitoko was rolling around on the cell floor, his nose bleeding, and he was only wearing boxer shorts.
The impression that I had was that he wasn't actually trying to hurt himself. It was more that he was unable to control himself.
Senior Sergeant Brenchley said he decided something needed to be done to protect Mr Taitoko, so instructed officers to place mattresses inside his cell.
I would have liked to have placed mattresses up the walls to provide further protection, but this was not practical. There were practical difficulties in doing this. Mattresses would need to be held up, and this wasn't practical or feasible. They would have just fallen over. I recall that the mattresses got covered in blood fairly quickly.
The lawyer representing the coroner, Matthew Mortimer, later asked Senior Sergeant Brenchley if placing the mattresses in the cell should have indicated further action was required, but he said doing this was not out of the ordinary.
At that point, I don't think any of us viewed Century as anything other than yet another violent prisoner in a custody unit. I don't believe at that stage any of us quite appreciated how serious his medical condition was.
Later in the night, Senior Sergeant Brenchley was advised a doctor, who has interim name suppression, had carried out a limited assessment of Mr Taitoko because of his extreme behaviour. Despite not being able to physically examine Mr Taitoko, Senior Sergeant Brenchley said the doctor was clear in his views.
He said that Mr Taitoko was coming down off drugs and or alcohol, and that it was not possible for him to complete a physical examination given his current state. He said that Middlemore would not be able to manage him, let alone treat him.
Senior Sergeant Brenchley said he relied on the advice from the doctor not to take Mr Taitoko to hospital and agreed with him.
It would be quite exceptional for me or for any police officer to go against what a doctor had suggested. But on this occasion, the doctor and I were pretty much on the same page, but coming from different perspectives.
But he said in hindsight, Mr Taitoko should have been taken to hospital.
Sentry should have been in hospital, and I think with hindsight, that's accepted. The problems that we had on the night, the risks that we had, was my knowledge and my experience, which is supported by Dr. is that Middlemore would not have taken him.
Senior Sergeant Brenchley said the police station's relationship with Middlemore Hospital has not changed since 2014. He told the Inquest police are reluctant to take prisoners to its emergency department for treatment, as it's likely they would be turned away.
I wouldn't say it's a bad relationship, but I would say it's flat at best, and I would suggest that some of that relationship is because of the reception that we can sometimes feel that we receive when we go there.
The 5-day inquest at the Auckland District Court continues. I tamaki makoro mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
Wellington Airport has revealed it plans to eat up half a golf course and build a new terminal, but it won't be without growing pains. The airport says the $1 billion plus upgrade is necessary to cater for the doubling of passengers by 2040. But the plans are raising the ire of local residents and workers, and at least one climate scientist. Harry Locke has the latest.
6.4 million people pass through Wellington Airport every year. In 20 years' time, it's expected to be around 12 million. But Chief Executive Steve Sanderson says there's no capacity for those future numbers. The airport is hemmed in between Lyall Bay and Evans Bay and the Miramar Links Golf Club. Steve Sanderson says it's clear where the expansion must go, but negotiating over the golf course hasn't been easy.
Wellington Airport operates on the smallest piece of land of 110 hectares. Compare that to Auckland, which is close to 1,600 hectares of land. So, we put a lot of thought into that. So the only way that we can do that is go south and to the east into the golf course. And those discussions with the golf course are well advanced now, and we're confident we'll have a commercial deal with them this side of Christmas.
As well as commandeering the back nine of Miramar Links, the upgrade will include a new international terminal, relocating flight catering and rental car facilities to an area in the north, and expanding the western apron for aircraft operations. Mr Sanderson says he hopes works can begin in early to mid-2021.
Particularly over the next 7 years, you'll see the apron and the terminal completed. So at the moment, we're just doing finalising our concept drawings, and we'll take that to full design, and we'd like to start construction within about 18-month period.
At $1 billion, it's a serious investment for the future. Wellington's Mayor-elect Andy Foster says the council, which owns a 34% stake in the airport, won't be putting any money into the project.
It's a development that the airport company is planning. There is no intention to call on the council for any equity injection. For us, it's airport, get on and do it. Our role is going to be, particularly as in things like the connections to the airport. Let's get Wellington moving is going to be very important there. Any of the other things in terms of transport around it, we will also have a regulatory role to some degree.
The plan, released today, has already attracted criticism from climate scientists. Professor of Physical Geography at Victoria University, Dr James Renwick, says expanding the airport is not a good call.
This is really the wrong way to be going if we're serious about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and getting on top of climate change. Doubling passenger numbers at Wellington Airport or any airport really isn't sustainable.
But Mr Sanderson says planes are becoming more fuel efficient, and Air New Zealand is planning to have electric-powered domestic flights in the next 5 to 6 years. The expansion is also threatening nearby homes and jobs, and while those who live there are used to the sounds, some say they want to hear more about the plans. Surf and streetwear company Backdoor is located in the retail park, which could be taken over by the airport.
I definitely would have expected that there'd be a little bit more information regarding how it's going to affect the retailers.
And down on Lyall Bay, These locals are worried about the influx of more traffic and more people.
Well, they need to sort out the roads, don't they, before they think about doing an expansion of the airport.
I reckon it's going to take up a lot of room on the beach and be a problem for dog owners.
The airport says it wants to hear that feedback from local residents, and the consultation period is open until the 17th of November. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
Let's get to a bit of your feedback now before the 6 o'clock news on lowering the speed limits in Auckland CBD. This is a vote that's happened today. So on most of those roads, the speed limit's going to go down to 30 k's. Michael says speed is not the real problem. It's an attitude problem. Don't care. I'm entitled. Get out of the way. This influences compliance with the road rules, says Michael, such as indicating. Others have got in touch to say, I'm not sure if this one is tongue-in-cheek. I support the 30k speed limit in the central area. It is a great improvement on what I have experienced in the past. And Dan has got in touch to say 30 kilometres an hour would be luxury. I have been in a bus for over an hour and we have only travelled 2k's. Dan, text us again. I want to know where you are and does this relate to the fire in the central city area? 2101. Give us an update, Dan. And Hamish says, from my experience, I would expect that the 30 kilometre per hour speed limit would represent an increase in the average speed.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. I'm Paul Brennan. Fire and Emergency says the fire raging at the Sky City Convention Centre in Auckland is challenging and will take some time to bring under control. More than 30 engines are at the burning construction site with reinforcements brought in from Hamilton. St John says one person has been admitted to hospital in a serious condition. The entire Sky City precinct has been evacuated. Fire and Emergencies say the blaze started on the 7th floor before spreading to the 6th. A spokesperson, Dave Woon, says bitumen and straw insulation are on fire. He says crews are inside the building with breathing apparatus, battling the blaze, which he says is incredibly challenging. The cause remains unknown. Roads surrounding the convention centre are closed and motorists are being told to avoid the area. The Economic Development Minister says the fire will mean significant setbacks to the construction of the Sky City Convention Centre. Phil Twyford says it's a project with major economic benefits for Auckland, so it's a disappointment.
Look, it's a major fire. I'm really happy to hear that all the workers have been safely evacuated, and it's too early to say with any certainty about what this means in terms of the construction, but I've no doubt it will be a significant setback.
Phil Twyford says it's unlikely to have any financial implications for the government. The police in Christchurch say officers are already getting more training on how to pursue fleeing drivers. A man has died after his vehicle was hit by a speeding car that police were chasing in the city this morning. 5 other people were injured. Today's death brings the total who have died in police pursuits in Christchurch this year to 5. In March, the police and the Independent Police Conduct Authority completed a joint review into pursuit policies. Superintendent Lane Todd says the recommendations are being adopted. He says officers have undergone additional training and the police have changed how they assess the potential risk of a pursuit. 1 person remains in a critical condition following today's chase, 3 are serious and another is moderate. A police officer who says he was bullied on the job is worried an independent review into how the police address bullying won't change the underlying culture. An RNZ investigation has revealed more than 100 current or former sworn and non-sworn police employees say bullying is widespread in the service. The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, has announced a review of the systems in place to deal with bullying complaints. But former officer John Woodward says the inquiry needs to look at more than just the complaints process and should shine a light on the fundamental issue, the culture. The terms of reference for the review will be announced later this week. Despite early losses in Canada's eastern provinces, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has retained power, but as a minority government. According to projections by the country's national broadcaster, his Liberals were earlier neck and neck with their centre-right Conservative rivals, led by Andrew Scheer. The BBC's Chris Buckler is at the Liberal Party's headquarters in Montreal.
The cheers that you can hear behind me as they put up a picture of Justin Trudeau on the screen gives you a sense that they believe he has the moral authority with the results that are being predicted. As we keep on saying, it is early in the evening, these results have to be confirmed. But ultimately, if they have more seats than the Conservatives, they can form a minority government or they can look for a coalition with some other smaller parties. And for them, tonight, that does look like a victory.
This federal election was seen as a referendum on Mr Trudeau, who endured a bumpy first term. A judge has withdrawn the conviction and guilty plea of a Dunedin man charged with sexually grooming a 14-year-old girl because the man now claims he didn't do anything wrong. Evan Smith appeared in the Dunedin District Court this afternoon to be sentenced, but instead the judge told him the case must go to trial. Timothy Brown was in court.
Earlier this year, Evan Smith pleaded guilty to communicating with a 14-year-old girl online and arranging a sexual encounter. However, he was actually talking to an undercover police officer. He was arrested last December after a 3-month police sting that followed an investigation into suspicious approaches being made to schoolgirls around Dunedin. Earlier this month, the 63-year-old told probation he never thought he was communicating with a 14-year-old and initially entered a not guilty plea. He'll appear again next month. In the Dunedin District Court, Timothy Brown.
Motorists using South Island mountain passes will need to take extra care tonight due to snow. Porter's Pass is expected to receive up to 12 centimetres, while up to 8 centimetres could fall on the Lewis, Arthurs and Lindis passes, as well as the Desert Road in the North Island. Road snowfall warnings are in place for the Crown Range near Queenstown, and the Milford Road is closed until tomorrow morning. Met Service says the stormy weather and snowfall is very typical for spring weather, with cool air pushing up over the country behind a spring cold front. It is 5 minutes past 6. On to RNZ Sport now. Australian captain Michael Hooper has refused to blame coach Michael Cheika's erratic selections or high-risk game plan for Saturday's 40-16 loss to England. The defiant Wallabies maintain the future is bright despite accepting they just weren't good enough after a humbling Rugby World Cup quarter-final exit. Hooper says they simply weren't able to execute their big moments.
Our game plan was solid. We believe we bought into the game plan 100%, and I think by the way we started, which was a lot of the criticism we'd copped up until that point, was pretty good, pretty sharp. We came out of blocks and had the English under a lot of pressure.
Retiring flanker David Pocock also insists Cheika's strained relationship with Rugby Australia Chief Executive Raylene Castle had no bearing on the Wallabies' poor showing in Japan. Welsh referee Nigel Owens has been named to referee the All Blacks England semi-final match this weekend. South African referee Jaco Piper has paid the price after a photograph emerged of him posing with Welsh fans mimicking a key red card incident from Sunday's World Cup quarter-final between France and Wales, which he presided over. World Rugby says Piper was not considered when selecting the match officials for this weekend's semi-finals. And in cricket, India has beaten South Africa by an innings and 202 runs in the third and final cricket test to complete a 3-0 series sweep in Ranchi. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we have a window on the world of robotic fruit pickers. Now that Donald Trump's vowing to keep the Mexican migrants out, US farmers want another cheap supply of labour. Kim Hill unpacks our addiction to plastic packaging with a panel of experts, and Mona Lynn Courteau has a helping of Latin American musical delights, which rhymes with nights, with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from our Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland to Taranaki, that includes Bay of Plenty, the Central High Country. Showers heavy with possible squally thunderstorms. Hail tomorrow morning. Gale westerlies easing tomorrow afternoon. Snow to 700 metres about the Central High Country at first. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, heavy showers and possible thunderstorms with gale southerlies tomorrow morning. Should clear up in the afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, including Wairarapa, also Marlborough and Canterbury. Showers possibly heavy and thundery, clearing tomorrow afternoon, and snow to 300 metres in Canterbury and Marlborough tonight. Gale southerlies tomorrow morning. For Nelson, scattered showers from this evening, some heavy, clearing tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, rain, heavy with possible thunderstorms, becoming fine tonight. Rain returns, though, tomorrow night. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers, possibly heavy, falling as snow to 400 metres, clearing for a time tomorrow afternoon, and a few showers at the Chatham Islands. It's nearly 6:08.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for joining us. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Health warnings are being issued in Auckland tonight amid fears that the smoke pouring out of the massive fire at Sky City's convention centre could make people sick. Plumes of black smoke have been billowing from the building for hours. Building materials, including building bitumen and insulation are burning. Auckland Regional Public Health is urging anyone near the fire to stay indoors, close windows, turn off air conditioning and wipe down surfaces which may have been affected by smoke. The fire has brought central Auckland to a standstill with road closures and cordons still in place. People are being urged to avoid the area if at all possible. Now, St John says one person has been admitted to Auckland Hospital in a serious condition. The blaze, which broke out on the 7th floor around 1 o'clock this afternoon, caused the evacuation of hundreds of construction workers. One of those workers, Harry Johnson, says he was just having his lunch when the fire alarm started sounding.
It was just a normal day's work, woke up normally, came to work, just been a standard day, pretty good day actually, hasn't been bad, but lunchtime occurred, just sitting down eating lunch and all of a sudden we hear the alarms go off and bloody hell, were we all scared. So after that, what we did, we just evacuated the area, looked outside and there was just a monster cloud of smoke right above us and it was just scary, extremely scary.
Staff have now been told to head home for the night. However, many still have keys and wallets inside the building. Peter Hamill is one of them.
I was just at a subway down the road having lunch and then looked out the window and there's a whole bunch of smoke coming out of the top of the building. Got told to go get signed off from the register by the Fletcher's staff. And then once we got signed off, realised that our keys had been left inside the building.
Is that pretty frustrating?
Yeah. Now we've got to wait around until we get picked up or until it opens.
And that was Peter Hamill. Now, Thomas Hurray from Fire and Emergency Auckland is on the line. Good evening, Thomas. Can you tell us what the latest is down at the fire?
Yeah, good evening, Lisa. Currently, our crews are extremely busy. We've got approximately 30 fire appliances in attendance with a number of support vehicles and specialists trying to assist. We're currently in the midst of a shift changeover at the moment, so that's adding to the logistics, but all taken care of. The roof is an issue. We currently don't have anyone inside the building. There's a couple of different options that we're working with, whether or not the roof, we wait till it to collapse or the fire might go out. So we're just in a bit of a holding pattern at the moment, and we're currently undertaking offensive external attack on the building. So the roof is a challenge here. Why is that? It's because where the fire started, we're not exactly sure, but it was in the roof cavity of some part of the building. I think at level 7, and we're just working with our crews to see if we can gain access, and that's been the most difficult to try and get our firefighters on there and in the building. So it's possible, Thomas, that one of the strategies might be just to let it burn through the roof. Yeah, we're currently undertaking an assessment to come up with multiple tactics to try and extinguish the fire as best we can. Obviously, the biggest thing is firefighter safety for our firefighters. So there's a number of different tactics that we're working through currently. We've got a large number of support people and specialists down there working to come up with a plan. So we're a couple of buildings away, but we were watching it from the windows and it seemed to spread really quickly. How far has it got and why so fast? So the latest sitrep that I've received from the fireground was probably around 50 metres by 70 metres, but that's again might have grown in the last time we've received a sitrep. The building material, we're not sure exactly what it's consisted of, but there's some talk of bitumen, so that's obviously got a hydrocarbon component in it, so that adds to the complexities of I guess, how fast the fire travels. Is it true that there were gas cylinders there, like welding cylinders and the like? I think generally it's a construction site, so most construction sites would have similar hazards, but those are normal hazards that we would face if we were to attend a construction site type fire. So our concern was obviously to try and evacuate the building as fast as possible, get the members of the public away and our firefighters safe. Is everyone accounted for who was on the site? From reports back from the building company and from the members of the fire and emergency on the ground, we've accounted for all the construction workers and the people on site, yes. What can you tell us about the injured person? Is that one of your crew or is that somebody else? Yes, it was one of our firefighters. It was sort of on an unrelated medical injury, and they're currently working through that with our support staff around that person. Now, did you say there's 20, 25 crews down there? Was that? There's up to 30 appliances at this time. So.
And so what does that mean in actual numbers of people fighting the fire?
So approximately each crew's got 4 personnel, so 4 times 30. So we're getting up to around 100 personnel on site at the moment.
And so, have you got enough people in Auckland, or are you pulling crews from elsewhere?
No, we've absolutely got enough people in Auckland, and we're currently going through our shift changeover at the moment. So basically, we're just doing a reshuffle. But no, we've got enough.
This is not going to be a quick fix, though. You're all going to be there through the night, I imagine.
Look, we're going to have crews there right until tomorrow morning at least. It's one of those fires that we can't see sort of direct possibility of it getting out extinguishing quickly, but we're working as hard as we can.
And just quickly, because I know you've got things to do, is there any risk of it jumping across to other buildings at this point?
Right now, the information that I've got is that we're covering our exposures, all the buildings beside that. So that's part of the tactics and the strategy that we're working with. So, that's about as much as I can say about that.
Thanks, Thomas. Really appreciate your time. That's Thomas Hare from Fire and Emergency New Zealand giving us the latest there on that massive fire at the Sky City Convention Centre. It's almost 15 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some of the Christchurch traffic cameras along the route of a police chase that turned fatal were not working. Why will be part of the investigation into the crash. An innocent man driving to work was killed when a Toyota the police were chasing smashed into his Hyundai at an intersection in Findalton just after 4 a.m. The 5 people in the fleeing vehicle were injured in the crash, one of them critically. The police say they've extended their condolences to the partner of the dead man, and the staff involved are deeply shocked by what's happened. Earlier, I spoke to Superintendent Lane Todd and asked him why the car drew police attention in the first place.
At this stage, one of our patrol cars, which was on night shift in Christchurch City, observed the vehicle travelling in what they described as an erratic manner. As a result of that, they activated the red and blue lights and siren, obviously with the intention of stopping and talking to the driver as a result of the driving. It was shortly thereafter that the vehicle sped off, and then a short pursuit ensued.
All right, can we just pause there? So I want to be clear about what erratic behaviour is. What was the vehicle actually doing?
Well, look, those are matters that we'll be canvassing as far as the investigation goes.
But have you asked the officers? Have you been told? I'm sure you would have at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so what was it doing?
Well, that's all part of the wider investigation. But what I would say at this stage is that the driving was erratic, and the police officers had concerns in relation to the way the vehicle was being driven.
So what? It was speeding? Did they suspect drink driving? Can you give us a little bit more so people can appreciate this? It's an incredibly serious situation. A member of the public is dead as a consequence. So could you just give us some details about why this car attracted police attention?
Yes, well, it's without going into the detail too much, but some of those assumptions you're making is what's attracted the police officers to the way the vehicle was driven. So
it was speeding?
Yes, there was potentially some of that, but also just the way it was driving. So in other words, not staying within the lane, and I'm going to describe it as erratic because I don't want to go to the details at this stage because that's part of the wider investigation.
Can you confirm that this was not a stolen vehicle?
We did confirm after several hours that the vehicle was not stolen.
Okay, so how did the collision happen?
So the vehicle, this is the Toyota vehicle, was being actively pursued by a police vehicle, and as it approached the intersection of Glendowie and Idris Road, unfortunately that Toyota vehicle has collided with a secondary vehicle that was driving through that intersection, and unfortunately T-boning that vehicle as a result of that.
What can you tell us about the occupants of the vehicle that the police were pursuing? At the time that the pursuit started, had the police identified that there were 5 people in the car? Did you know generally the ages of those people?
So at this stage, that's more detail that will come out fully with the investigation, other than to say that the officers did note that there were several people in the vehicle. They, at that early stage, weren't aware of ages. And weren't aware of exact numbers inside that vehicle, other than there were a group of people in it.
So were the actions of the driver here serious enough to warrant a pursuit? Because you will be fully aware of the IPCA report that was released earlier in the year into fleeing drivers, and your own policy is, and I'll read it, the fact that a driver fails to stop when signalled does not in itself justify a pursuit. Explain to us why this pursuit was justified.
So, look, that's matters that will be part of the wider investigation, but what I would say at the early stage is that the officers had three concerns. So one concern was the erratic driving behaviour of the vehicle. They were also making inquiries and concerned that the vehicle may have been stolen. And bearing in mind, as I've just indicated, several hours later we established that that wasn't the case. But for the officers concerned at that time, they were making inquiries and were not confirmed that the vehicle was stolen at that stage. So that was another concern they had. And then the third thing was whether potentially the driver was a drunk driver, again based on the erratic behaviour of the driving.
So does the risk that was perceived from this vehicle, did it warrant, in your view, the commencement of a pursuit? Because that's the decision that was made at the time.
Yes, so look, our officers have to go through a risk assessment, which I'm sure you can appreciate every time they're dealing with an incident. So I'm satisfied at this early stage that they did follow through with that risk assessment at that time, and bearing in mind
prior
also
to beginning the chase, because again, that's one of the recommendations, isn't it? That the threat assessment is done prior to commencing the pursuit. So
correct.
Was that done?
Yep. Look, at the early stages of the investigation, because bearing in mind we're only a few hours into it, I'm satisfied that they've followed that process, and bearing in mind also that we have a communications inspector that is actually controlling it from afar, so in other words from the communications centre, and that commissioned officer was also doing the risk assessment. So at this early stage they were satisfied that the actioning of the pursuit was justified under our policy. But those are matters that we will have to canvass, obviously, as part of the wider investigation.
What about the continuation? Because the start is one thing. So the pursuit went for just over 4 minutes. Is that that seems longish? Nobody called it off, correct? At the time of the crash, the pursuit was still underway.
Yes, that's correct. And bearing in mind, 4 minutes is relatively short period of time. 4 minutes isn't a long time. But bearing in mind, during that 4 minute period, the risk assessment continues all the time. So in other words, the driver, the passenger of the police vehicle, the communications dispatcher, and also the communications inspector, those risk assessments are happening throughout that whole 4 minutes.
What speed was the police car going at the time of the crash?
Yep, that's to be determined as part of the wider investigation.
Over 50 kilometres an hour?
That's to be determined as part of the wider investigation. I'm not going to go into the details.
There's high public interest in this, Superintendent. So what I'm asking you is, were they exceeding the designated speed limit for the area that they were in?
That's part of the wider investigation.
You must know
and there's two or three reasons why I'm not going to go into the detail for that, because, we have to do an investigation, and part of that is doing thorough assessments on CCTV cameras, getting evidence from vehicles, talking to potential witnesses, talking to the occupants of the vehicles.
Aren't the police officers, the police officers required to give you situation reports during the pursuit as part of that? Speed is one of those things. So at the last report, how fast were they going?
Well, I'm not going to disclose that at the moment because that's part of the investigation.
So over 50 k's?
I'm not going to disclose it because that's part of the wider investigation.
I'm not asking you the exact speed. I understand that you need to ascertain that, but I think it's fair for the public to know whether they were exceeding the speed limit for the area that they were in.
Yes, they were exceeding 50 kilometres per hour.
The shift commander who takes control of the pursuit, and you've said they were in control of the pursuit at the time, have you discussed with them why it's continued, why they allowed it to continue?
I've had a hot, what we call a hot debrief with them, but in terms of the wider investigation, those are matters that will be pursued. But from what my understanding was, having come in and spoken to the high-ranking officers that were actively involved in the matter, that those risk assessments were carried out prior to and during. And at this stage, from what I've been advised, is that the pursuit was not called off based on the risk assessments that were carried out throughout.
And that proved to be wrong, that risk assessment then?
Well, that's a matter for the investigation to find.
Do you not think that the death of one person proves that the risk assessment was incorrect?
Look, absolutely. It's a tragic event for everyone involved. And as I said, our condolences are absolutely with the family of that poor gentleman that was unfortunately has passed away as a result of this. So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind this is a tragic event. What we have to do is to work through the various processes to find out exactly what's occurred. And bearing in mind we're only a few hours since this incident occurred, it's too early for us to give a definite answer around those. Having said that, I certainly acknowledge that the public will want to know the outcome.
And I understand that you are in an incredibly difficult position, but the fact that you have an innocent bystander dead brings us back to the core question as to whether the risk of the pursuit was worth it. You have a vehicle that's potentially speeding. It is not stolen. There seems to be limited other factors. In hindsight, was it worth it?
Look, hindsight's a great thing. And what I always have to do when I'm looking at these matters is to look at the police officers at that time with the information and the facts they have in front of them. They have a very clear risk process that they run through. It's all very well for you and I to discuss this, several hours after the event, knowing what we know now. We have to think about what those police officers were dealing with at that time and the information they had at that time.
And the information you've provided is potentially speeding and slightly erratic behaviour. Is that the benchmark for a police pursuit?
No, I don't think that's fair.
And that's Superintendent Lane Todd there. Let's take a complete change in direction. Rogue free-ranging chickens in a West Auckland suburb are finally being rounded up and taken to new homes. At least 200 chooks have made Titirangi their home, and while they're popular with some, the birds have also been blamed for attracting rats, harming native birds, and even holding up traffic. Our reporter Chen Liu was there as contractors tried to wrangle the birds.
Dozens of roosters, hens and chicks gathered around the car park at the Titirangi War Memorial Park today, where contractors had placed food to lure them. It's the second day of the Great Chook Roundup, after the local board voted to move them out of the area for rehoming. The contractors will keep coming back until they've rounded up all the stragglers. Close to 30 have already been caught this week and taken to Kumeu for a vet checkup before they are sent to a new home. Waitakere Range's local board chairperson Greg Pressland says there are simply too many chooks.
They scratch around the kauri and they may feature in the spread of kauri dieback. They were getting rid of the undergrowth. They were scaring the native birds away. Native bird life seems to have gone down. They were messing everywhere and they were a bit of a traffic hazard.
Local resident Heather Kearns says she wants the chickens to be treated well.
I don't think they're safe here, and I think they do cause a danger to other people here. So that's a worry, and I can understand that the people who have to drive through this area all the time would find it quite hard and, worrying about running them over.
Another woman, Talina Hansen, agrees.
I think it's cool that we've got free-range chickens. I think it's unique to Titirangi, but I think the numbers that they are in at the moment is it's an overpopulation, so I think it's good. And of course, probably better for them as well in the long run.
At the Kumeu showgrounds, the captured chickens wait for a vet check. Graham Ashby is doing the checkups.
I am checking for any lice or mites, which we expect in the wild, coming from other birds, sparrows and anything that they come in contact with, but I haven't found anything yet. Also checking to make sure they're well muscled, and they are, and their crops are all full, so they're clearly eating currently and doing really well.
For any chicken that is not fit enough to be taken to a new home, an animal rescue farm is ready to help them recover. Danny Prance from Rodney-based New Beginnings Rescue and Rehoming says they'll ensure any of the unwanted birds find a nice home.
None of our animals go to anyone that will eat them or slaughter them after a certain age. So we ensure all animals go to forever homes and forever homes only. It takes several months for them to heal. They generally get a name by that stage and generally stay with us because we've just fallen in love and it's just too hard to separate.
Some of the healthy chickens are going to a farm in Ardmore in South Auckland. Peter Alexander from Bees Things, a beehive rental business, runs the farm. He says fences have been put up to give the chickens a safe space of their own, hundreds of thousands of square meters. The chickens will have company too, the cows, ducks and chickens already on the farm, and they'll have food and get a job to do.
This is a win-win situation for the chickens and for us. The chicken go in between the beehives and pick up the dead bees that the bees are throwing out, and we don't have to deal with cleaning that up. So they do us a service, and for that we keep them.
The chicken capture continues for a couple of weeks to round up all 200 of the birds. The local board says they are going to ensure the chickens are not separated from their families, known as clutches, when rehomed. Mo te hotaka o te ahiahi nei ko chanleo tēnei.
And if you're listening to that on the drive home, well worth going online to have a look at Chen Lu's piece. There's some very handsome roosters and some cute-looking little chicks. We're getting a bit more feedback on the speed limits in Auckland, lowering them in the central city area. This person says, I think lowering speed limits will slow business down, frustrate drivers and increase pollution. I think it would be better to raise the driving age, drug test drivers to make the roads safer and strictly enforce the current speed limits and have more speed cameras, they say. Interesting fact, apparently, if you lower the speed limit from 50 k's to 30 k's, it's going to take you an extra 48 seconds per kilometre, so you can do the math on your trip. Another person says this is only going to frustrate people more. They already drive terribly. New Zealand driving is terrible, they say. It's one of the most dangerous things to do, lowering the speed limit, and we need to have compulsory driving schools for people. Interesting. And another person is saying, yeah, great idea. So mixed response there. We'll be back again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Fire and emergency say they fear the Sky City Convention Centre roof may collapse as the fire rages at the construction site in Auckland. Health officials have told people living and working nearby to avoid breathing in the smoke. Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party has retained power, but as a minority government, according to projections by Canada's national broadcaster. And the police in Christchurch say officers are already getting more training on how to pursue fleeing drivers after a man died when hit by a speeding car that police were chasing this morning. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
I've been living and working in Australia for 50 years, and I have never, ever seen a coordinated, unified campaign by the media on anything at all.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night